There comes a moment on your journey, often unexpected, when something within begins to quietly unravel. It might follow a sharp spiritual insight, a sudden clarity that cuts through the fog, or perhaps after a painful breakdown that shakes you to your core. This unraveling isn't loud or dramatic. Rather, it is like a candle's flame slowly flickering in a silent room until it fades away. When you look around, the noise and distractions that once overwhelmed you suddenly lose their grip. The illusions you once believed, the dazzling mirages of truth, start to reveal their emptiness. For a fleeting moment, this unveiling feels like power, like freedom itself. But then, almost without notice, the very meaning that grounded your life begins to slip away. This dissolution doesn't occur all at once. Instead, it recedes gently, much like a distant song fading beneath the surface of your awareness, until all that remains is silence. It is in this profound quiet that your soul grows still. You find yourself no longer chasing or striving, not from defeat or despair, but from a deep weariness, a fatigue that doesn't scream, but sighs softly, like awakening from a long, strange dream. The restless pursuit of goals loses its urgency, and then, amid this calm, a subtle yet insistent question arises. Why, now that I see through the veil of illusion, do I feel this overwhelming emptiness? Irony drapes this experience with a heavy cloak. We are taught to expect that awakening will ignite a blazing fire within us, that clarity will bring passion rushing back in vivid waves and color. Yet for many, especially those with sensitive, reflective souls, the seekers and feelers, the opposite unfolds. The brilliance dims, the light softens, and a strange quiet takes over. I recall a dear friend, bright and spiritually hungry, who had absorbed the wisdom of Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, and Krishnamurti. After a profound, dark night of the soul, she stepped into awakening. She understood the illusory nature of ego and the futile chase for external success. But months later, she lay curled on her bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, unable to rise. She confessed to me, "I used to cry because I wasn't achieving enough. Now, I don't care if I achieve anything at all. I thought awakening would light a fire inside me. Instead, I feel extinguished." Carl Jung, the visionary who charted the depths of the unconscious, never spoke in the spiritual jargon of our age, but he grasped this descent into silence perfectly. He reminded us that true consciousness does not come by chasing the light, but by making the darkness conscious. His words ring with unsettling truth. Enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This insight is beautiful in theory, but lived experience reveals the gravity behind it. Awakening is not a reward to be claimed. It is an unraveling, a slow, gentle demolition of the self you once thought you were. The pillars that held up your life, your dreams, your ambitions, your roles and desires, begin to crumble beneath the weight of this new awareness. What remains is not clarity, but a sacred kind of bewilderment, a deep and humbling uncertainty that asks you to surrender everything you thought you knew. Here's where the paradox sharpens. You haven't disappeared, you've disoriented. Your ego, that tireless navigator of goals and validation, hasn't been destroyed, it's been dethroned. It no longer holds the map, and without that familiar compass, your sense of movement evaporates. It's not depression in the clinical sense. It's not burnout or laziness. It's liminality, a word rarely spoken, but deeply felt. You've awakened from something, Yes, but you haven't awakened into something else yet. And in that space between identities, motivation begins to vanish, not as a failure of will, but as a symptom of transformation. And what a peculiar transformation it is. This emptiness you're feeling, it's not an error. It's not a malfunction in your system. It's something ancient, something sacred. Carl Jung warned us, in his own way, that our modern world is allergic to this sacred pause. In a culture obsessed with acceleration, with fixing and optimizing, we fear stillness. We run from silence. But this in-between place, this quiet void, is not the absence of life. It's the womb of it. Jung called it necessary for individuation, the soul's journey toward becoming whole. Yet no one ever prepares you for this passage. No one tells you that awakening might leave you feeling like a ghost inside your own skin. And that's why we need to talk about it. Because right now, you may be judging yourself for losing interest in the very things you once pursued with passion. The to-do lists, the 5-year plans, the morning routines, the motivational podcasts, they all seem to bounce off a psyche that no longer responds. It's not that you failed. It's that the part of you that used to be motivated by achievement and applause no longer holds the steering wheel. Something deeper is stirring underneath the silence. That's why this message is for you. If you've landed in that gray fog that often follows awakening, where everything feels both empty and full at once, where the external world keeps spinning, but your inner world has gone completely still, know this: you are not broken. You are being rewritten, not just mentally, but existentially. Your inner operating system is being reformatted, and Jung saw this coming long before it ever became a hashtag or a meme. Let's look closely at what's happening beneath the surface. For most of your life, motivation came from identity, the one you built, the one you were handed, the one that told you who to be, how to act, what to want. And so you moved through the world trying to be seen, to be worthy, to be someone. That isn't a flaw. It's human development. Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear so we can belong to the world. But here's the twist. The awakening process doesn't polish the mask. It peels it off. And once that mask is gone, the goals tied to it begin to unravel. And that's where it becomes disorienting. Without the persona, your ambitions no longer make sense. They don't fit. They were designed for someone who no longer exists. You become like an actor who walked off stage in the middle of the play and now stands in the wings with no script, no direction, and no idea what comes next. That's the truth of this strange stillness. It's not apathy, it's evolution. It's not failure, it's an invitation. And if we listen closely to Jung, he points the way forward. He reminds us that the ego isn't the enemy. It's not to be destroyed or abandoned. It's to be integrated. And that process is called individuation. It's not about transcending your humanity. It's about becoming whole within it. It's about allowing the ego to realign with the self, not the fragile mask we wear in society, but the deeper, wiser presence within us, the one that doesn't crave applause, the one that doesn't chase meaning, the one that is meaning. And when that self begins to rise, it brings with it a purification, a psychic purge. Anything that was born from ego, performative relationships, forced ambitions, goals based on comparison, starts to fall away. Even things you once cherished begin to feel hollow. You may look at your vision board and feel nothing. You may scroll through your old bucket list and wonder, who wanted this? That feeling is not regression. It's clarity. And now you find yourself in that strange, silent interval, a middle space few ever name, and even fewer understand. It doesn't look like enlightenment. It doesn't feel like joy. It isn't the mountaintop the spiritual books promised. No, it's more like drifting in a fog where language fails and motivation feels like a foreign concept. It looks like sitting still for hours, unable to explain the shift inside you, while the rest of the world rushes ahead with urgency and noise. You're not lost. You're between worlds. You've stepped out of the ego, but the self has not yet fully arrived to take its place. And this quiet void, isn't a dead end. It's a rite of passage. But in a culture that worships momentum and celebrates hustle, this stillness is easily mistaken for stagnation. The soul's pause is misdiagnosed as apathy. The sacred inward retreat is mislabeled as failure. And so, inevitably, you begin to judge yourself, not because something is wrong, but because no one ever told you this space exists. And yet, Carl Jung did. He called it enantiodromia, a turning point where things naturally shift into their opposite. After years, sometimes decades, of striving and performing, your inner pendulum swings toward stillness, not as a collapse, but as a balancing act. You move from "I must do everything" to "Why do anything?" And that question isn't nihilism. It's wisdom emerging in its rawest form. In myths and ancient initiations, this is the cocoon phase, the liminal realm between death and rebirth. It's not glamorous. It's not shareable on social media. It's not you meditating by a waterfall in Bali with a peaceful smile. It's you dissolving. It's you becoming unrecognizable to your former self. The caterpillar isn't becoming something new. It's turning to liquid. And yes, liquid doesn't look like progress. It doesn't check boxes. It doesn't impress anyone. It just is. It surrenders. This is the moment the ego panics. It cries out for definition, for identity, for something solid to grasp. But the self, the quiet, rooted presence at the center of your being, is whispering something softer, something deeper. Wait, trust. I am building something real. And this is where much of modern spirituality falters. It preaches bliss. It promises light. It sells joy in packages of 10 affirmations or 5 morning habits. But Jung knew better. He knew that without walking through the darkness, we never touch our gold. He taught that the only way to become whole is to turn inward, into the shadows, the pain, the silence. Not to wallow in them, but to integrate them. Because that's where the forgotten pieces of your soul reside. Not in the light, but in what the light was never able to touch. So if you feel numb, unmotivated, detached, it's not dysfunction. It's design. Your psyche is wise beyond comprehension. When it senses the need for deeper repair, it slows everything down. Not to punish, but to prepare. It blocks your energy, not to break you, but to protect you, so that what is false can fall away, and what is real can rise. You are not falling behind. You are being reassembled. And then, just when you least expect it, something begins to stir. A quiet, unfamiliar sense of movement. It's not the fire of ambition. It's not urgency or restlessness. It's more like a slow remembering, a subtle internal pull, not to return to the old life, but to begin building a new one. And this new life doesn't begin with a plan. It begins with a whisper. This is what Jung called the emergence of the self, not as a theory, but as a felt reality, a living compass within you that doesn't shout orders, but nudges you with resonance. You don't chase direction anymore. You feel when you're aligned. You don't strategize meaning. You live it, moment by moment. And what's most astonishing? It's often beautifully, breathtakingly ordinary. When the self takes the lead, your life doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be honest. You start saying no to what doesn't resonate, even if it looks perfect on paper. You stop performing. You begin to follow your curiosity instead of your checklist. Peace becomes more important than proving, and alignment replaces adrenaline as your fuel. You begin to live symbolically, not as a fantasy, but as a sacred dialogue with existence. You listen to your dreams. You notice the synchronicities. You trust your gut. You ask different questions, like, what's quietly calling me? Instead of, what should I be doing? Or where is life guiding me? Instead of, what's the plan? And no, this doesn't mean you abandon ambition. It means you transmute it. You stop being driven by fear and begin to be led by depth. Your energy no longer scrambles to impress. It moves to express. You create, you serve, you speak truth, not because you should, but because every cell in your being says yes. So if you're sitting in that space, wondering where your spark went, remember, the old flame burned out to make room for something deeper. A fire that doesn't flicker in the wind. A flame that lives beneath appearances and survives the storm. Jung never promised comfort, but he offered something far more valuable, the truth of the soul's path. And if you're walking that path now, you're not behind. You're becoming. This isn't the end of your awakening. It's the beginning of your becoming. And if this speaks to something you've been holding in silence, share it. Let it breathe. You're not alone on this road. You're part of a deeper story, one that begins not when you wake up, but when you dare to keep walking through the fog. Thank you for walking this path with us today. If this journey has stirred something within you, reflection, awareness, even clarity, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your presence here helps us continue creating content that nurtures self-awareness, emotional insight, and spiritual growth. Until next time.